This story is quite short, but it really traumatized me so much when I was a child, and I actually succeeded to forget about it for a long time. Now, I've been reading the Reddit for some weeks now, and my memories got brought back to me for some reason. After reading some scary stories on here, it's not as scary, terrifying, or creepy as some of the others here, but for a 13-year-old who's never seen any violence and always lived in the comforts of a happy family life among friends, it was terrifying in its own level. So, for context, I was around 13 at the time, and I don't quite remember the date. I've always been a big, childish person, partly because of a car accident when I entered a medium school that felt like it had stopped my growth mentally. I barely had any friends because I was going through the weird looks bullying, and the only ones that were okay to hang out with me were people younger or with the same mindset as me. Every couple years, my parents would send me to a summer camp lost in the mountains, where there were basically mountain activities like hiking, exploring forests, and all that. I live in France, and I don't know how summer camps elsewhere work, but here, it basically works from an age classification. There were 3 groups: the blue one, the younger kids, the yellow one, the medium, and the green one, the older. I was supposed to go to the yellow group because I was still too young, but for some reason, I got brought to the green group, composed of people that were 16 or 17 at the time. And basically, everyone hated me for being so young and childish. Let's not hide it. The day that I remember was one of the last days. The instructors that were keeping an eye on us brought us to the deepest spot of the forest to have a picnic. And after that, they looked at us and asked if we wanted to play hide and seek. Everyone was probably too old for that, but they still set up the thing, to which most refused to even hide. I was a kid, and of course I was overexcited, and when they started counting, I ran as quickly as I could, to a place super far so they wouldn't find me. There was a smallish river, and so I jumped over it, and after some steps, I feel a hand catching my hairs very violently. I try to turn myself, but the hand just slips to my neck and catches it really tightly against its side. I was terrified and I tried to fight back and to resist, but the hand that was restraining me was one of a grown man with lots of strength. I started screaming at the top of my lungs. I never screamed that loud, but seemingly nobody even heard me. And the guy started talking while dragging me to the forest. He was completely mad and kept repeating, "You'll see. I'll hurt you so much you'll cry and scream even more." I remember him talking about harming me. I was 13 and I was terrified. I had never been through anything like this. He dragged me further into the forest and I kept screaming, hitting him until at some point I found a way to bite his hand with all the strength of my jaw. He screamed from the pain and just went, "You're crazy." And when he was hurt enough, his arm retracted. I escaped and turned back and made the sprint of my life. I think the guy must have lost interest in me or something because he didn't run after me. I jumped back over the river and found there was only one friend in the whole camp. I kept running though, and I'm still not sure if she saw the thing that happened or if she just ignored it. I went to the monitors, but I felt too terrified to do anything or even tell them, and so I didn't. I didn't know who it was. I didn't know if it was someone from the camp or a total stranger. I didn't even see his head, his skin, the clothing that he was wearing. Nothing. I was just too scared. That same night, I called my parents, but they couldn't come to pick me up right away, so I had to go back home on the bus like everyone else. What terrified me the most was the guy could be one of the people in the same group as me. He could have just hit me in my sleep and dragged me somewhere. I still don't know who that guy is, and I never wanted to know more. I want to share one of the scariest things of my entire life. Not only because of a creepy subject, but also because of a creepy guy. You can treat this as a cautionary tale. Last night, my model and I went to finally do a photo shoot that we wanted to do for a long time. So basically, I wanted a dead girl in your headlights at night type of photo. It was 9 p.m., but it was already pitch black here. We found some deserted road in the middle of nowhere and started the shoot. We went through 2 outfits and she started to change into the 3rd. And then all of a sudden, we saw a car in the forest. There was a dirt road to the left of us. Apparently, he had gotten stuck in the mud and couldn't get out. I would post a video of it if I could. We were waiting for him to get unstuck and drive wherever he wanted to drive, but it was taking so long that we decided to go for it and continue our shoot. The model was still trying to change. It's not so easy in the dark. So I decided to go outside and get my settings ready, so she wouldn't need to stand in the cold rain for too long. As soon as I got out, this dude magically got unstuck and sped to the road that we were on. And so I hopped in the car. We locked the door and sat there. In that moment, we were a little scared, but still, he could be very well just stuck in that road and he just got out. He pulled at the driver's seat where my model sat, like 10 centimeters from her car. He almost broke off her side mirror, and he looked into our car. We had this big butcher knife for photos, so she pulled it from her bag and showed it to him, and that's when he sped off. We decided to go the opposite way in case he decided to block the road or something, but we met at dead end and had to go back. When we went to the place that we met this creep, he was in the same spot as before, pretending to be stuck again, and so we sped right past him and called the police, because we thought he could just be waiting for somebody to go up to him and to offer help, and then he would harm them. So guys, please be safe. Pay attention to your surroundings and maybe don't go taking photos in some deserted road. This happened a couple of years ago when I was 16. It was a warm summer night. At nights like these, me and my friends would often grab a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of beer each and go outside to enjoy them. We come from a really small town where everybody is somehow connected, so the only way for us to drink and smoke without our parents knowing was to do so in secluded places. Luckily, our town is surrounded with huge forests. We were both very familiar with them since we practically grew up there. This one time, it was a night as usual. We both grabbed our forbidden contraband, some flashlights, and we headed out. We took the path through the long meadow, which ended at the edge of the forest. From there, led a path through the forest by which it's a 20-minute walk back to town in steep, downhill terrain. At the place where the meadow and the forest meet, there is a gazebo with a fireplace where people go for picnics. As we were walking through the meadow, we would stop a few times to ensure from afar that the gazebo wasn't occupied. It was around 11 p.m. and the night was incredibly dark. Even though we were out in the open, we had to use our flashlights to see anything. We made sure that the air was clear. We approached the gazebo to light our first cigarette. We were just standing there, puffing and talking, while always scouting our surroundings with the beams of our flashlights. After maybe 5 minutes, we decided to take the path through the forest back to town. We walked about 30 meters, at which point we couldn't see the place where we were previously standing, and that's when we heard it. From the gazebo where we were standing just seconds earlier, came a long, terrifying scream. It sounded as if somebody, a man by the sound of it, was being cut to pieces while still very much alive. The kind of scream that turns your blood to ice instantly. After the first scream, there is a pause for a few seconds. During this whole time, we were both so scared that we couldn't even move. Then, it started again, even louder and more terrifying. The second scream snapped us back to reality. Without a word, we just started sprinting through the rough terrain, not once looking back. At this point, I was so pumped up with adrenaline that I couldn't hear anything except my own heartbeat resonating in my ears. We've never run that fast, and we didn't stop until we had reached the lights of town. When we finally did, we both just sat on a sidewalk under a lamppost, panting and gasping for air. Nobody said anything for a good 30 minutes, until from my friend came a single but quite eloquent word. Crap. After a while we started talking about it. We came up with a conclusion that either somebody was having fun at our expense, or somebody really got hurt. At the end, we decided to head back there the first thing in the morning. But surprise, surprise, no signs of anyone being injured or anyone struggling. We decided that it was just someone playing pranks on us. However, to this day, it keeps gnawing at me. Something just doesn't add up. We were standing there for quite some time, so the person must have been very well hidden. On the other hand, it would be almost impossible for anyone to just walk in there without any light, since it was so dark. And even if he had some kind of torch, we would certainly spot him. Anyway, Screaming Man in the Forest, I'm glad I didn't see you. Since my last post here sparked quite a discussion, I decided to post another one of my unsettling stories that are tied to our local forests. I grew up in these forests and I feel quite comfortable there. Nevertheless, I stumbled into a few unsettling situations there that would firmly stick in my mind forever. This was one such occasion. I was 18 at the time. One evening, me and my two friends, Mike and Paul, decided to go camping. Well, camping maybe isn't the right word, since we didn't intend to spend the night. Only to chill and have some fun around the campfire for a while. The plan was simple. Head out, build a campfire, drink a few bottles of wine, eat something, and head back home for a good night's sleep. We met at my house when it was still sunny outside. We got ready and we headed out. Our destination was an old abandoned quarry in the middle of the woods, which was maybe 40 minutes from my house. Even though the quarry has a tragic and frankly creepy history, it's a popular place for such occasions. When we got there, the sky was already colored red as the sun slowly sank behind the hills. We quickly gathered all the firewood that we could, so we wouldn't have to look for it later. As the darkness fell and absorbed all of our surroundings into impenetrable blackness, we already managed to get the fire going. We were in a great mood, and we were getting ready for our first toast. That's when we realized that we made a horrible mistake. We had forgotten the corkscrew. We were trying to open the wine without it, but we quickly gave up, because the bottles were quite expensive and we didn't want to damage them. At this point, it was clear that one of us would have to sacrifice himself and jog back to retrieve the corkscrew. After a bit of haggling, I volunteered. However, I had two conditions. Firstly, they would give me a hatchet in case something went wrong along the way. And secondly, no pranks when I got back. Mike and Paul agreed without hesitation. They shoved a hatchet into my one hand and a flashlight to another and sent me on my way. As I was jogging through the forest, I heard a noise resembling a wild boar. Suddenly, I remembered a warning I had received from an older hunter a few days ago. He said that this time of year, the boars were getting dangerous, especially at night. I was a bit nervous, but luckily, I managed to survive with no harm. I arrived safely to my house, much to the surprise of my mom, who didn't expect me so early. I explained the whole deal and she just laughed. I grabbed the corkscrew and was back on my way. Not wanting to experience an unpleasant boar encounter, I chose another slightly longer path, this time through an open field. After a while, I got to our spot. It was a small clearing surrounded on one side by massive rocks, maybe 70 meters tall, and on the other side by a thick forest. Somewhere in the middle of the clearing was our campfire. When I approached it, I realized that there wasn't anybody, although our backpacks were still on the ground and the fire was burning bright. Great. We specifically agreed that there would be no pranks when I got back. Those dicks think that they're funny, I thought to myself. I resignedly sat down near the fire while facing the woods. That's the only place where those two assholes could have hidden, I thought. I was really tired and all I could think about was the taste of that exquisite Pinot Noir that we had brought with us. I really wasn't in the mood for their games and I was getting quite mad. And that's when I heard a snapping of twigs and rustling of leaves from the edge of the forest, maybe 30 meters from where I was sitting. The sound was rhythmical and was undoubtedly the sound of somebody walking. I aimed my flashlight to the spot where these sounds were coming from, and between the trees I spotted a tall person wearing a dark hoodie. As I shined my flashlight on him, he stopped walking, turned to me, and just kept staring motionlessly. Even though he was directly facing me, I couldn't really see his face. I shouted, "Hey Paul, you fatso. I know you're trying to scare me. We agreed on something, so stop messing around and come on out." As I finished, the hooded figure had just turned around and walked deeper into the woods. Exactly at that time, my phone started ringing. Hastily, I took it out of my pocket. It was Mike. I took the call and I started barking at him. "Really funny, dude. I thought we agreed on something." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you trying to mess with me. I clearly saw you, so you can come out now." Mike, as if frozen for a minute. For what seemed like an eternity, all I could hear was his heavy breathing, and Paul mumbling something in the background. When he finally snapped back to reality, he just said, "Dude, we're at your house. We heard some footsteps. At first, we thought you were trying to mess with us, but then we got scared and decided to look after you. I forgot the phone at your house, so we couldn't even call you. Just get the heck out of there and we'll come back for our stuff together." It's BS. Just another one of your funny pranks and I'm not buying it. Hold on a second. For a while, all I could hear was some incoherent mumbling. "Hey, what's going on?" said the voice of my mom coming from the phone. My head suddenly spun and my heart skipped a beat as I realized that they weren't kidding. Suddenly, a freezing wave of fear ran through my body. However, I managed to convince my mom that everything was fine, that she didn't need to worry. She gave the phone back to Mike. "Just leave everything and come back. We're heading out now. We'll meet you halfway there. I'm not going anywhere alone again. You better get your butts here and do it quick. I'm waiting for you." But... And I hung up. I didn't wish to make any more noise than I already did. I quickly turned off my flashlight and started to back off from the light of fire. I moved all the way to the huge walls of rock. I figured that if I had my back covered by the rocks, I would eliminate one of the possible ways the unwanted visitor could approach me. I was standing there in complete darkness, trying not to make a sound, while tightly clutching my hatchet, which would be for the next half an hour my best friend. I had to constantly convince myself not to curl into a ball in fear. Even my own body started to betray me. As my hearing got worse due to my savagely beating heart, I was trying to calm myself. But then again, in worst case scenario, every little bit of adrenaline would help. After it seemed like an eternity, I spotted 2 weak light beams coming from the forest. I heard Paul shout my name. I've never been so relieved. I finally ran out from my hiding to greet my 2 friends. For quite some time we were just standing there, laughing like maniacs from relief. We were even getting a bit cocky and we thought about saying, after all, there was just one supposedly creep lurking between the trees, and there were 3 of us. Funny, just minutes earlier I was crapping myself in fear, and now I was suddenly full of tough macho BS thinking, what could possibly happen? In the end, healthy judgment got the better of us and we decided to leave. We packed our things and put out the fire and got out. We took our bottles of wine to enjoy somewhere else. Somewhere where it's nice and brightly lit. I wasn't sure about sharing this story. It still gives me shivers every time I remember what happened. This happened in the Amazonas, in the border between Brazil and Peru. The jungle is an amazing place to live. Everyone knew each other, and I had a big group of friends of different ages. The only horrible part of the Amazon is the existence of certain groups that try to control the region. I was 7 when this happened. Every kid in the village knew we had freedom to go anywhere, as long as it wasn't close to these certain groups, and that we could never leave the village at night. My parents taught me since I was very little how to hide in case something happens, and to run if I see things that get dangerous. I remember all adults of the village were celebrating something. I think it was the equivalent to Halloween. I remember my mother painting her face in a tribal way, and all the children went together to a house to stay safe and have fun. The eldest girl was in charge. She was 17, and as soon as our parents had left, she ignored us and she left with her friends. Our closest group consisted of 6 children. I was one of the youngest ones, and we all listened to the most adventurous one, Leon, who was 14. Whatever Leon said, we followed, because he was fun, always making challenges, and he knew how to take care of us. Yes, despite him being reckless, he was our friend. We loved him, and knew he would never abandon us if something happened. After playing soccer and eating, these 6 of us had become bored. Carla, one of the 6, had the idea to dress up like our parents did, with tribal makeup and dresses. We agreed, and soon, we were all dressed up like the kids who lived in the village of the deepest regions of the Amazon. I remember us playing around until Leon said to, and I quote, "Let's explore the Amazon and find a hidden treasure." We all cheered and agreed to leave. It was easy to escape, since the girl who was supposed to take care of us had left. Leon managed to find a lantern and a boat big enough for the 6 of us, and we decided to sail off. It was around midnight, but we didn't care. Just imagine 6 kids dressed up on a boat, splashing water everywhere and trying to find an imaginary treasure. No phones and no adults, just the jungle and us. It was life at its purest. Everything seemed to be perfect until we heard people calling. Who was there? And we saw a lighted boat approaching. Quickly, Leon dropped the lantern and instructed us to lay down on the boat's floor and stay very still. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. I remember clearly how we were all with our bellies to the floor, grabbing our hands and not even daring to breathe. But it was too late. "Stop hiding, I see you," a voice said as the guy illuminated our boat. We stood up and I saw 4 men with guns. I'm not talking about small pistols pointing at us. They laughed and said, "They're a bunch of kids." Leon put himself in front and said that we were on a hurry because our parents were expecting us home. The biggest guy, who had a red bandana, laughed again and said, "Little kids shouldn't be out here alone at night. You could disappear in the jungle and no one would ever find you." At this point, I was super scared and Carla started crying. "You can go. You're just tribe, hua hua," which means baby in the language. And they laughed. I remember all of us hugging each other, crying and sailing as quickly as we could. Once we got home, we entered the house and closed all the doors and windows. We all slept together on the floor, but before that, we agreed not to tell this to anyone in the village, not the elders or our parents, even though no one knows what happened that night. Years later, I understood why they let us go. They thought that we were kids from the local tribe. We had no value to them. If they had known that we were dressed up and were from the village, I probably wouldn't be typing this story. First off, I am living in a very rural, small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes, and also about 10 minutes away from the town. If you cross the street, It'll take you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. First Christmas Day in the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk, as we were really full from all the food. It was about 5 p.m. and already dark when we had left, and we had brought big and bright LED flashlights with us. I also took my camera and my flash, as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest and then turn right, following a small graveled cycle track close to the forest border, which connected our village and the next, and maybe 15 to 20 minute walk between villages. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw our flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the road, close to the trees. This struck me as odd, as cars are not allowed to drive there, and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed to the light inside of the car and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for a while. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with an intriguing structure, and I asked my partner to point the flashlight towards it so I could focus better and photograph it with my flash. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing there, behind us in the middle of the road. He's looking at us. Nobody was following us the whole way. I kept looking around and behind us occasionally, because at this time in the evening, and close to the border of the forest, there are boars sometimes. It is mating season, so they're more aggressive than usual. And indeed, there was a man standing behind us, staying out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. It wasn't even legal to drive on that path with a car. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react and he just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that it wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was calm, sure about there being a normal explanation for his behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I decided to GTFO and follow the path leading to the next village. It was maybe 5 to 7 minutes until we reached it. I remembered the letters on his license plate, not numbers though, unfortunately, and I googled it, and it turned out that he was from a city about 6 hours away from our village. Mind you, the country that I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you are only allowed to travel even by car if you have very urgent reasons. After we had reached the first lantern in the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and going back inside. I was able to see that he had parked there again and turned the lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We then went home on a much longer way than initially intended, as I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery had died on the way and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then. But I called them as soon as I had arrived back home and gave them all the details. A big regret that I didn't memorize the whole license plate, but it was just so surprising that I seriously didn't think about it. Also, it only occurred to me as really strange when I thought about the frozen windows and that he couldn't possibly have walked behind us, plus him having no light and not responding. He did seem to be sneaking up on us when I sat down to take the photo. I think that I was very lucky to have my partner, the camera, and the bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was alone. This happened to my roommate and I 2 years ago, when we had drove into the national forest just outside of the town that we live in. We go to a small college in New England, about 3 hours from any major city. For context, this forest has quite a few urban legends surrounding it, and the local community, although they do go there often, have a lot of superstitions about how to be safe while there. I had just broken up with my partner, and my roommate could sense that I was feeling down. Finals were just around the corner, so she decided to help me get my mind off things and suggested that we go to a nice spot that she had found last week and just chill and de-stress. We took a couple of beers with us and drove to the secluded spot in the forest. From the moment we left the main asphalt road in the forest, I saw a couple of things that unsettled me. You could see the abandoned houses of a ghost town from the higher ground the road was on, and we saw this old rag doll hanging from a rope on a tree. It's creepy stuff, but we didn't really give it a second thought and we kept driving. We got to a clearing and parked our car behind some trees, popped open the back of our SUV and started just talking and playing music. About 10 minutes into this, 2 cars appeared from the road and parked in the clearing. My friend didn't pay them attention and instead she kept talking. But as I was facing them from where I sat, I couldn't stop seeing what they did. A guy popped out of each car, talked for a few minutes, and then I saw them take out a long object covered in a dark plastic bag from the back of one of the cars. This is when I noticed these guys had guns, and not like shotguns, which I see often in this town, but handguns. And then they started lighting the bag on fire. I told my friend to get down, and she turned around and saw them for the first time. Black smoke was rising from the bag. In between trying to keep my head down and steal glances at them, I saw them take out a second object, and I heard them shoot at it, right before they had set it on fire. I don't know how long my friend and I were lying there in silence, but it was definitely enough to let the terror sink in, and whisper to each other how much we loved each other in case this was what we thought it was. At some point I looked up, and saw that they were pointing at our car and saw them walking into the woods, maybe trying to follow our tracks or trying to look for us. All they know was that right then, I told my friend to jump into the driver's seat and make a run for it. I shut the back door in between that and the car starting up. The guys heard it and started running towards us, and then ran towards one of their cars and hopped in. We went over a hill and, driving way above what was safe for dirt roads on a hillside, we lost them. We drove to a neighboring town and roamed around for a while, just to make sure that no one was following us, before we went back to our dorm. That day, we tried to make fun of the whole situation, and got really drunk before finally breaking down and crying from knowing we had seen something we were not supposed to. We were at first terrified of telling anyone, but eventually did tell officers on campus who contacted the police, but never found anything. Hey everyone, I am French, so I apologize in advance if I make any mistakes with my English. As I said, I live in France and this story happened to me this summer, just after the lockdown had ended. I was, and still am, 19 at the time. After the lockdown had ended, I went to my grandparents to spend a few weeks. I got tested before and there was no problem. My grandparents live in a small city in the north of France, and they have a dog who's quite big. When I was really young, I lived at my grandparents for a year, and at the time, the dog was only a puppy. Her name is Chippy, in French, which kinda means little devil in English, but in an affectionate way. Considering when I was living there, I played with her a lot. We were both really close, and that will have its importance later. 2 of my hobbies are having long walks and running. Thus, every evening, I was going out for a long walk with the dog. There's a track that follows a path through the forest, and then there's a small hill, and on top of that, there's a big place with a lot of fields there. I run there a lot, so I have a pretty good idea of the place. The air is fresh and the view is quite beautiful. So, I was going there with the dog every day. It was also helping my grandparents to have her doing lots of exercise. The first time that we went there, nothing special happened. We had just enjoyed our walk. It's about 6 to 7 kilometers, so it was around an hour basically. The next day, when we had arrived down at the top of the hill in the field, it was probably around 10 p.m., but there was still some light outside because it was summertime. There were 3 other people walking in the field. They were younger than me, probably about 15 or 16, and I also noticed that they were smoking. So my guess was that they had used to come here so they couldn't be seen by their parents. We went past them. I greeted them and they greeted me back. Once again, nothing special there. For a whole week, I did this walk around the same time at 10 p.m. and passed by those 3 guys with nothing special happening, and it was perfectly fine to me all the way. The second week, as usual, I went for the walk with my dog Chippy and arrived at the fields. There was only one of the 3 boys, but he wasn't smoking this time though. When he saw me, I was at the entrance of the field, just after the little hill climb, so the entrance of the forest was just behind me. He did a sign with his hand to catch my attention, and asked if I had a lighter, which I actually did in my pocket. So I told him, yeah, sure. And so he walked to me, the hand in the pockets of his hoodie. When he came near, for some reason, I felt a shiver. It's crazy how sometimes your instincts know there's a problem, but you don't listen to it because nothing looks weird to you. I handed over the lighter when we had passed by, and at that moment, my dog was staring at him. And then everything happened really fast. He did a really fast movement with his hand coming from his hoodie, and I only saw something shiny. I just had a reflex of throwing myself back, so hard that I fell down, and I realized that it was a knife he was holding, and he had just tried to stab me. What saved me is my dog, God bless her. When she saw the guy trying to stab me, she jumped on him and he fell down. As I said before, it's a really big dog. I immediately got up on my feet and heard something in my back. From the entrance of the forest, I saw 2 guys wearing animal masks running to me. They were probably the 2 friends. In this moment, your brain acts for yourself. You don't think at all, and in this case, the answer he found was really simple. The other guy was still on the ground. I just watched my dog and told her, "Run." I started running and she followed me, but I heard the worst possible thing from the guy who got up as well. "Catch him. Don't let him go." At this moment, I was totally terrified. I was just running and running, and I heard them following behind me. And I was thinking, how long will they follow me and who the hell are they? This was the first time I was really happy to be a runner. I was clearly better than those guys, and that totally saved me, because they chased for something that felt like an eternity to me. Fortunately, at the end of the field, there's another entrance to the forest, and this time, it descends with the road at the end. I heard the steps of the 3 guys vanishing as I arrived at the end of the forest. Though, I didn't stop running until I arrived at my grandparents' house and locked myself. I caught a big breath and gave a huge hug to my dog. I saw in her eyes that she totally understood what had happened, and I had never been so happy to have her in my life. After that, I told everything to my grandparents. We called the police, but they didn't find anyone. I don't know what these guys wanted, but the animal masks really make me think about some kind of satanic ritual. I really don't want to know anyway. I still do long walks with Chippy, the hero dog, but I now go earlier into places with a little more people.